Hello and welcome back to Grim Tales. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy dark, twisted, grim tales that send chills down your spine, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, Daryl yelled, "I found an alien rock," and came cutting across the yard like a kid who'd discovered treasure. It was Sunday, late afternoon, the kind of sticky Georgia day where the air clings to your shirt. We were doing what we did most weekends in our little trailer park plastic chairs in a loose circle, a cheap grill smoking, burgers sizzling, somebody's radio playing too low to enjoy. Bob, the oldest guy in the park, stood at the grill with a spatula in his hand like it was a badge of office. He pressed down a patty and didn't even look up. "Daryl, nobody wants to hear your nonsense," he said, the words half lost under the hiss of grease. Daryl acted like he hadn't heard him. He reached our circle, dug into his jacket pocket, and pulled out a stone about the size of a big mark. It wasn't just green. It was glowing, but not like a flashlight or a toy. The glow seemed to come from inside it, like the stone had a pulse. The color shifted constantly, never staying the same shade for long. For a second, everybody stopped talking. He held it up between his fingers, proud, eyes bright. "Found it near the gas station by the dirt road," he said. There were scorched plants all around. "It came from the sky, Bob. This thing was sent by alien." Across the yard, under an oak tree where some of the women sat in folding chairs, Arena called out without standing up. "Or by the devil. It creeps me out. Get that evil thing out of our house, Daryl." Daryl's face tightened, and I saw that familiar look come over him, the look that meant the conversation was about to turn into a fight. "God damn it, honey," he snapped. "Can't you see that religion of yours is just a psyop?" That was Daryl. He could make anything into a battle. And Arina, his wife, was the one person in the park who could meet him in the middle of it and throw the same energy right back. They argued the way some couples breathe. It didn't matter who was around. While they went at each other, Daryl handed me the stone like he needed someone neutral to appreciate it. It was heavier than I expected. I held it for a few seconds and tried to act normal, but the truth is, it bothered me. The green inside the stone moved like liquid, but the surface was solid. It didn't feel warm or cold. It felt wrong, like there was no proper way for it to feel in a human hand. The glow didn't light the air around it much, but I couldn't stop looking at it. It pulled your attention without any effort, like your eyes wanted to stay on it, even if your mind didn't. Daryl snatched it back quickly, like he didn't trust me not to keep it. Then he stomped off toward his trailer, the stone in his fist, shoulders hunched against the rain that had started to fall in thin, lazy drops. That should have been the end of it, just another Daryl story to laugh about later. But it wasn't. Back then, we lived in a trailer park about 50 miles south of Atlanta. It wasn't the kind of place people moved to because things were going great. I lived alone and kept to myself, working through my own problems. Most of us were doing some version of that. The park sat off a 2-lane road surrounded by pine trees and open patches of red dirt. You could hear trucks at night and cicadas all summer. Bob had founded the park years earlier after getting out of prison, and somehow, over time, he turned into the closest thing we had to a mayor. People went to him when there was trouble, when someone needed work, when a couple was fighting too loud, when a trailer needed patching. He acted rough, but he watched out for the place in his own way. He was also the first sign that something had started to go sideways after Darrell brought that stone home. One night, late, there was a knock on my door. It wasn't the polite kind. It was urgent. I opened it and found Bob standing there, hunched over, coughing between breaths. His Rottweiler sat at his feet, calm, watching me. "John," Bob said, and shoved the dog's leash into my hand. "I need you to take care of my dog." I blinked at him. "What's going on?" He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and tried to straighten up, like pride could hold his body together. "This cough won't stop," he said. 2 days now. I'm driving into the city to see a doctor. That worried me. Bob didn't go to doctors unless something was really wrong. He didn't like anyone telling him what to do. The fact that he was standing on my porch at night asking for help made my stomach tighten. I told him to be careful in the rain and wished him well. He nodded once, climbed into his truck, and drove off with his headlights cutting through the dark. Bob never came back. Somewhere on the ridge road that separates the districts, he must have had some kind of episode behind the wheel. That's what they said later. His truck went over the embankment. They found it the next morning down in the trees, wrecked bad enough that it was clear he hadn't had a chance. I remember standing outside with other neighbors while the news moved through the park like smoke. People talked in low voice. Some shook their heads like it was just another tragedy life handed out for no reason. But I kept thinking about that cough, how he'd looked, how sudden it all felt. It didn't fit him. Looking back now, Bob's death was only the beginning. Not long after that, Charlene, one of the women in the park, who'd always seemed like she was hanging on by her fingernails, lost custody of her 2 girls. She'd fought hard to keep them. She'd been clean, at least as far as any of us knew. Then, within a week of losing them, she was back on heroin. You could smell it from the road when you walked past her trailer, that sour chemical stink mixing with old smoke. Pete, the mechanic 2 spots down, developed a skin infection on both forearms. At first he joked about it, said maybe he'd brushed up against poison. Then it spread, ugly and swollen, the skin cracking like dry earth. Doctors couldn't identify it. One morning he woke up and 2 of his fingers looked gray at the tips, like the blood had given up. He lost them before lunch. He came back from the hospital silent, staring straight ahead, and nobody knew what to say to him. Those were only a few stories. There were more. Accidents, sudden job loss, fights between people who'd been fine the week before. One person's car catching fire for no clear reason, another person getting sick so fast they looked like they'd aged 10 years in a month. Even I wasn't spared, and that's how I know I'm not just telling myself a scary story. I'd been sober for 7 months at the time. 7 months is long enough that you start believing you've turned a corner. You start thinking you're a different person now. Then one morning I woke up, and the craving was just there, fully formed, like it had been waiting quietly right beside the bed. It didn't feel like temptation. It felt like a command. I fought it for a few hours, tried to distract myself, tried to remember what it cost me last time. By the afternoon, I was in a store buying a bottle. I told myself I'd have 1 drink. That lie didn't even last the drive home. Around the same time, Darrell and Irina's fights got worse. They were always loud. But this was different. The anger didn't burn out. It stayed hot, night after night, like something kept feeding it. When I saw Daryl outside, which wasn't often anymore, he wore a cap pulled low. His skin had gone pale and dry, and under the porch lights it looked almost scaly. He moved stiffly, his limp more noticeable, like his body hurt in ways his old injury couldn't explain. I didn't connect it to the stone at first. I wish I could say I did, because maybe I would have done something sooner. But in a place like that, misfortune is normal. You get used to it. You tell yourself it's coincidence because the alternative is too heavy. A few Sundays later, Irina showed up to the cookout alone. That alone was strange. She usually came with Daryl, even if they were mad at each other. And she always brought something homemade that made the rest of our food look sad. That day, she just sat down quietly, hands folded, eyes tired. I sat next to her and tried to make small talk, asked about the village she grew up in. She usually loved talking about its snowy winters, church celebrations, family stories. I barely got the question out before she cut me off. "You need to talk to Daryl about that Devil's Rock, John," she said. Her voice was low and tight. "It's making people sick." I asked her what she meant, even though part of me already knew. "Everything went wrong the moment that thing came into our house," she said. She pressed her hand over her hair like she was trying to keep herself together physically. "Daryl won't stop staring at it, day and night, just sitting there with it in his hands. He stopped looking for that remote job he spent months chasing, and he hasn't showered for a week. That's not a normal rock. It's draining him." She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked. "And my cancer," she said. "I was sure it was gone for good. The doctor said so." She swallowed hard. It came back. She broke down then, not loudly, not in a way that demanded attention. Just quiet crying in a plastic chair while grill smoke drifted past like nothing in the world had changed. I sat there feeling useless, watching a woman I barely knew fall apart. And I hated how familiar it felt, grief showing up at the wrong time, in the wrong place, with nowhere to put it. I told her I'd talk to him. I meant it. I stood up, walked over to their trailer, and rang the bell. Daryl had always liked me, probably because I never openly judged him. I listened when he talked. I didn't laugh in his face. I let his conspiracy theories float by like weather. So when he opened the door and saw me, his face cracked into a grin. But the man in the doorway wasn't the neighbor I remembered. His skin had turned a sick yellow, brittle-looking, like cracked sand in a drought. Red blotches spread across his cheeks and disappeared under thin patches of hair near his ears. His eyes looked too bright and too tired at the same time. He waved me in and handed me a beer like it was the most normal thing in the world. Inside, the living room was a mess. Two recliners faced each other like a stage set for arguments. Fast food bags, paper plates, random stacks of printouts covered the floor. The air smelled stale, like sweat and old grease and something sour underneath. "This thing is special, John," Daryl said before I could steer the conversation anywhere. "Folks on Reddit are saying it might be some kind of interdimensional communication device." "Daryl," I said, cutting in. "You look like hell. What happened to you? Allergies or something? I don't know." He waved it off like it was an annoying detail, then pulled the stone out. He'd put it on a cord and wore it around his neck like a pendant. Up close, the glow looked worse than I remembered. It wasn't just bright, it was busy, like something inside it was moving and thinking. The green shifted in a way that made my eyes struggle to focus, like the color didn't want to stay in one place. I tried again. I brought up Irina, the cookouts he'd stopped coming to, how worried she was, how worried people were. It was useless. Daryl's attention kept snapping back to the stone. Every time his fingers touched it, his face softened in a way that looked almost loving. I finished the beer and left. I didn't tell Irina how it went because I didn't want to add more fear to what she already carried. Back in my trailer, I poured whiskey to take the edge off. One drink became two, then more. Somewhere along the way, I slid down to the floor with Led Zeppelin playing on my phone, drunk enough to feel numb, but not drunk enough to block out the screaming coming through the walls from Daryl's trailer. It wasn't just shouting. It was plates shattering. It was voices cracking. The kind of fight that sounds like it's breaking something for good. I remember hearing it very clearly, and then my memory drops out like a light being switched off. The next morning, I stepped outside for air with a headache that felt like someone had packed my skull with cotton and nails. The park looked gray and tired. The ground was damp. The sky hung low. Daryl was sitting in the grass in front of his trailer, with his knees pulled to his chest, crying. I stopped a few feet away, not sure if he'd even see me. He looked up, face blotchy, and spoke like the words were tearing out of him. Irina left last night, John, he said. She packed her clothes and rode off with a cousin. I told him she'd come back, because that kind of thing had happened before. They'd split, cool off, return. It was their pattern. But as I said it, I could hear how hollow it sounded. Days passed, and she didn't come back. Daryl came apart quietly and alone. He stopped leaving his trailer. The only signs of life were the lights flickering on past midnight. A strange laughter drifting through the walls that didn't sound like someone enjoying anything, and his voice talking to something that never answered. Meanwhile, the whole park seemed to keep sliding downhill. Every household had its own new disaster. When a young couple who'd just moved in lost their baby to a miscarriage, and someone else's wife had a breakdown so bad they had to drag her into a car and take her to a psychiatric hospital, people started talking in a different way. The Sunday cookouts changed. They weren't really cookouts anymore. They turned into meetings, unspoken at first, then more open. People remembered Irina's warnings about the stone. With a growing list of sickness and bad luck, the idea took shape. Maybe it wasn't random. Maybe something had come into the park and poisoned it. Every misfortune since Daryl's discovery got laid out like evidence. People put them in order, building a story that made sense in the way fear always makes sense. It didn't matter that we had no proof. It didn't matter that we were all the kind of people bad things happened to anyway. The stone became the center of it because it was easier to blame one thing than to accept that life could be that cruel for no reason. After Bob died, a tall man with a thick mustache stepped into the role of park mayor. He wasn't official, just the loudest and most organized voice left. One afternoon, he pulled me aside near the dumpsters. "Let's go talk to Daryl," he said. "Something's wrong with that man, and it's scaring the park. You're the closest thing he's got to a friend here. I think we should go together." I didn't want to. I could feel that in my gut. But I agreed, because saying no felt like letting the fear keep spreading, and because part of me still believed Daryl was just depressed and spiraling, and that two people showing up might shake him back into reality. We went that night, the tall man and I, walking down the dirt path between trailers under buzzing streetlights. The air was thick with insects. Nobody was outside. Curtains were drawn. It felt like the whole park was holding its breath. We knocked on Daryl's door. He answered within seconds, like he'd been standing right behind it, waiting. The sight of him made my mouth go dry. His face was worse than the last time. The red blotches were no longer just spots. They were open and wet, weeping, spreading across his forehead and down his neck. He still wore the cap, pulled low, and he'd added a long-sleeve sweatshirt, even though it was hot enough to sweat just standing still. The green stone hung on a cord around his neck. The tall man froze for a beat, eyes locked on Daryl's skin, the way it looked wrong, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. Daryl broke the silence with a sudden cheerfulness that made it worse. "Come in, please." We stepped inside carefully. The smell hit me first, so strong it made the back of my throat tighten. Rotting food, sweat, something metallic, and the sourness of a place that hadn't been cleaned in a long time. The living room was almost unrecognizable now. Broken plates and dirty dishes mixed with papers and fast food bags. The clutter formed little trails between objects, like someone had been pacing the same paths again and again. The two recliners were still there, facing each other like they were meant for a talk show. "You came to see The Rock, didn't you?" Daryl asked. His voice had that excited edge, like he was trying not to shout. "It's going to change everything." Arena was wrong about all of it. "Daryl, that's not why we're here," I said, and I stayed standing because sitting felt like making myself vulnerable. "The community is worried. People are talking, and they're starting to think maybe you should." "The Rock decides," Daryl snapped. The shift was instant. One second he sounded eager, the next he sounded cold. The air in the room felt tighter, like it had shrunk. "Those people don't decide a damn thing," he said. The tall man straightened up, jaw set. He was trying to do the tough leader thing, trying to look Daryl in the eye and make him back down. "You're going to have to leave the park. The community is in agreement. We need you to pack up and go." Effective A loud crack cut him off. For a second, my brain didn't know what it was. Then I saw the smoke, quick and gray. I saw the tall man's body jerk and drop like a tree being cut. He hit the floor hard, and his head turned at an angle that made my stomach twist. Daryl was holding a gun. I don't know where he got it. I didn't even know he owned one. But I knew what I was looking at when I saw the hole in the tall man's head and the way his eyes went empty. My body locked up. My hands rose on their own, slow, helpless. Every part of me wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "Sorry about that, John," Daryl said, gun pointed at me. His voice was calm, and that calm was worse than any yelling. "Sit down so I can explain." I sat because I didn't know what else to do. Daryl lowered himself into the recliner across from me like he had all the time in the world. He rested back, breathed slowly, and stared at the stone on his chest like he was listening to something through it. His fingers touched it gently, and the glow reflected on his chin. He stayed quiet for a long moment. The only sound was my breathing and the faint buzz of an overhead light. "It talks to me, John," he said finally. "Not the way people talk. It goes deeper than that. It tells the truth about people." He lifted his eyes and looked straight at me. "She told me about you," he said. "About your drinking. About how you ruined your marriage." My throat tightened. I didn't answer because I couldn't. The fact that he could say that out loud, so calmly, in that room with a body on the floor, made my skin crawl. And that young couple who lost their baby, Darrell continued. He shook his head slowly like he was disappointed in the whole world. Their sin did that. The rock just showed what was already there. As he spoke, my eyes drifted to the side, toward a tray table next to his recliner. The kind of folding table people use to eat in front of the TV. There was a plate on it, and on the plate was a severed hand. For a second, my brain refused to name what I was seeing. Then I recognized the nail polish. Irina always painted her nails dark blue. Always the same shade, bought from the same drugstore in the city because she liked consistency in a life that didn't give her much. My stomach turned so hard it felt like I might pass out. But I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I was scared that any reaction would entertain him, or anger him, or make him decide I was next. Darrell reached up and took off his cap slowly, like a man getting comfortable at home. His hair was thin in patches. His scalp looked dry and cracked, like his skin everywhere else. Then he started scratching. At first it was normal, like an itch. Then it became frantic. He scratched his forehead, then the top of his head, harder and harder, like he couldn't stop. Bits of dry yellow skin flaked away. Underneath was raw red flesh, shiny like a wound that never closed. He dug at it until it split, and I saw something darker underneath, pushing upward. Two pointed shapes started to rise through his scalp, slow and steady, as if they'd been growing there for a while and were finally breaking through. My mind went blank. I couldn't make it fit any reality I understood. I just watched, frozen, while my heart hammered like it was trying to escape my chest. Then Darrell laughed. It didn't start as a laugh, not exactly. It started low, like a cough, and then it grew. The sound shifted in pitch halfway through, rising and falling, and there was something about it that felt layered, like more than one voice was trapped inside the same throat. He threw his head back and let it out, loud and broken, filling every corner of the trailer. It felt like the sound was pressing against the walls, making the air vibrate. That's when I saw the gun. It wasn't in his hand anymore. It sat on the tray table next to the plate, less than a foot from him. His head was tilted back, eyes on the ceiling, laughing like he'd forgotten I existed. My body moved before my mind could argue. I stood up quietly, then lunged for the door and ran. I expected a shot in my back. I expected pain. I expected to hit the dirt. But as I hit the door, took the steps in one long stride, and ran across the yard without looking back, the only thing I heard behind me was that laughter continuing, fading with distance but not stopping, as if he hadn't even noticed I was gone. Outside, the park woke up in pieces. Lights turned on in other trailers one by one. Doors cracked open. People stepped out in their pajamas, drawn by the sound or by something in the air that told them something terrible had happened. I called the police with shaking hands and tried to speak clearly. I told them there had been a shooting. I told them someone was dead. I told them to come now. Nobody went near Darrell's trailer. Even the people who'd been talking big about confronting him kept their distance, standing in clusters with their arms crossed tight, staring at that door like it might open again. A few minutes after I ran out of there, a fire started at the back of Daryl's trailer. At first, it was just a glow through a window, then smoke, then flames that moved too fast. The whole structure caught like it had been waiting for a spark. The heat pushed out into the yard. People backed away, shouting, covering their mouths. Somebody tried to get closer with a garden hose, but it was useless. The fire climbed and ate the roof, and the trailer began to groan and sag. By the time the cops arrived, there wasn't much left to save. They kept everyone back and called the fire department, but even with the trucks there, the trailer folded in on itself before sunrise, collapsing into a smoking heap of metal and charred wood. Over the next 2 days, they went through the wreckage. They sifted through ash and debris while we watched from behind yellow tape. They found bones that belonged to Arena. That much was confirmed, and it made the whole park go silent in a heavy, guilty way, like we were all remembering every time we'd heard them fight and decided it wasn't our business. But they never found Daryl. They never found the rock either. The police asked questions. They looked for footprints, for signs he ran into the woods, for any clear explanation. Some people said he must have escaped before the fire spread. Others said he died somewhere in the flames and they just didn't find everything. Officially, it stayed messy. Unclear the kind of case that turns into paperwork and then into a file nobody wants to reopen. But in the park, people had their own explanations. People whispered about the glow of the stone, the way bad luck had lined up after it arrived. People argued whether it was something from space, something from the ground, or something worse, something that didn't care what we believed, only that we were close enough for it to touch our lives. I moved out not long after. I told myself I needed a fresh start, and I did. But if I'm being honest, I also left because I couldn't stand the feeling that something had been let loose there. Something that had looked at our little community and found it easy to break. Even now, when I think back to that night in Daryl's trailer, I don't picture the gun first. I don't even picture the hand on the plate, though that image still turns my stomach. I picture Daryl's face as he stared at that glowing green stone like it was speaking directly into him. And I picture the way he laughed, like he wasn't alone inside his own body. Story 2, as I sit here writing this, it's hard to put the last few days into any kind of clear order. My thoughts feel like thick fog. There are holes in my memory, like someone took a pair of scissors to the timeline and threw pieces away. I'm writing this for 2 reasons. First, I want to tell my story so other people can protect themselves. Second, I need something to hold on to, something that proves what happened and helps me remember as long as I still can. I live in an old seaside town in Oregon that I won't name. It's the kind of place tourists would call peaceful. Pretty slow, the kind of town people move to when they're tired of cities and noise and bad air. It looks safe if you're just passing, but small towns are good at hiding ugly things. Terrible things happen in places like this all the time, and because nobody outside the town is paying attention, it doesn't make the news. It becomes local gossip, then a sad story, then a quiet memory people stop bringing up. Lexi and I lived in a duplex. Our side had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room that always felt slightly too, and windows that faced the street. On the other side lived an older couple, nice people. The kind of neighbors who smile too quickly and ask too many polite questions, not because they're nosy, but because they're lonely. They were always offering us leftovers. Most often, pie. They would knock on the shared wall side door and say they had too much. And did we want it? I always suspected they just wanted company and didn't know how to ask for it. Lexi was my best friend. We'd been friends since kindergarten. We grew up together in the same damp air, in the same gray light, with the same salt smell drifting in from the ocean. As adults, she went to nursing school during the day and worked nights tending bar. She dealt with drunk guys who thought being loud made them charming, and drunk guys who thought tipping money meant they owned her attention. She hated the worst parts of it, but she couldn't argue with the tips. Tuition doesn't pay itself. Winter in our town was always wet, always cold, but the strangest part wasn't the rain. It was the fog. There's always fog here, even at midday. I know a bit of fog sounds harmless if you've never lived in a place like this, but I mean thick fog, the kind that turns the whole world into a gray wall. In other places, fog burns off when the sun comes up. Here, it doesn't. It stays like a curtain you can't pull back. Most locals don't think about it much. You grow up with it, you learn to drive in it, you learn to live your life in it. Until things stop being fine. The day it happened, the rain was coming down hard enough to blur the road even without the fog. My headlights lit up the mist in front of the car, making a bright tunnel of gray-white. I was driving down the hill from our place. Lexi was in the passenger seat. We were talking about something normal. I can't remember what. That's one of the things that bothers me the most, the way ordinary moments get erased. I swear to God I never saw the old man. I couldn't see anything. None of us could. 1 second the road was empty. The next there was a sound that didn't fit with the rain or the engine. A dull thud. Then another sound, sharp, like something snapping. Then something wet, something awful, like tires over mud. And then a dog barking, frantic and high. It all melts together now. My brain plays it back as noise and flashes instead of a clean sequence. I can't tell which sound came first anymore. I only know that by the time my foot hit the brake, it was already over. Adrenaline took me over in a way I had never experienced before. People talk about adrenaline like it makes you fast and sharp, like in movies. That wasn't what it felt like to me. It felt like numbness. My body went cold and distant, like I was watching myself from a few feet away. My thoughts slowed down even as my heart hammered. My eyes and ears stopped being reliable. Everything was real, and at the same time, it felt unreal, like my mind was trying to protect itself by making the moment feel less solid. Lexi was the first one out of the car. She shoved the door open and stumbled into the rain, shouting something about calling 911. Her voice sounded wrong to me, too loud and too thin, like it was coming from a bad speaker. This isn't happening. That was the phrase running through my head. It's a common response to trauma, I learned later. Your brain tries to deny reality because accepting it would crush you. People know about fight or flight, and some people know about freeze. I think that's what I did. I froze. My mind locked up. My body did the bare minimum. I moved like a person in a dream, slow and clumsy. Maybe that's why Lexi heard the words and I didn't. Maybe my brain shut down too hard to notice. Either way, she heard something out there in the fog, right after the impact, and it changed everything. I've been having migraines lately. They come in waves, sometimes lasting hours. The doctors say it's whiplash and stress from the accident, maybe a mild concussion too. They tell me to lie down in a dark room when the pain starts, to stay away from screens and bright lights. I would do that if it wasn't for the knocking. I need to explain something about Lexi and me, because none of this makes sense without the history. It's hard to write about, because I feel like I'm writing about someone else's life. But it was mine. It was ours. When we were kids, Lexi and I were part of a little group of friends at school. 4 of us in total. We were the kind of girls who thought we were tougher and stranger than everyone else. The kind who wore black hoodies and wrote dramatic poems and dared each other to do stupid things. We called ourselves the Salem Witches. We thought it was clever. Salem was the biggest town near us, and in our minds that was close enough. Our English teacher, Miss Myers, tried to correct us once. She told us the Salem witch trials happened in colonial Massachusetts, not Oregon, and that we were mixing up history. But we didn't care. We weren't interested in facts. We were interested in the feeling, the idea of it. We liked the name. We liked pretending we were part of something old and powerful. For a while, it was harmless, just a phase. Then high school came, and that's when it turned into something else. As the Salem Witches, we had sleepovers at each other's houses, rotating so nobody's parents got suspicious. One of the girls, Bree, had the best setup. Her backyard was huge, and it backed right up into woods that seemed to stretch forever. One summer night, we decided to camp. We told our parents we'd be in Bree's yard, close to the house. What we didn't tell them was that we planned to go deeper into the woods, far enough that we wouldn't see the porch light, far enough that we would feel like we were somewhere no one could reach us. Just how much further? Lexi asked as we walked, struggling behind the rest of us with her sleeping bag slipping off her shoulder. "Keep up, Lex," Bree called back. She was the one who always acted like a leader. Just a little more. There were 4 of us. Me, Lexi, Bree, Jenna. We carried cheap tents and sleeping bags and flashlights with weak batteries. The last bit of daylight was barely filtering through the trees, and the woods felt bigger the darker it got. We kept walking for what felt like forever. My legs started aching, and my skin kept prickling, like the forest was listening. Finally, one of them called us to stop. I think it was Bree, but it might have been Jenna. This is what I mean about memory. The important parts stick like burrs, but the details slide around. Lexi and I had been in Girl Scouts, so we knew how to get a fire going fast. We gathered dry sticks and bark and built a small pit, and soon we had flames. The others set up the tents. There was only the thinnest slice of moon in the sky. Without the fire, it would have been pitch black. The moment the fire settled into a steady crackle, the night sounds came alive around us, owls calling, insects clicking, the occasional rustle from something moving deeper in the brush. At first, it was fun. We roasted marshmallows and made sloppy s'mores. We heated up Vienna sausages on sticks and pretended it was survival food. We laughed too loud because we were trying to prove we weren't scared. But we all knew what we were really there for. There was a little chant we'd learned somewhere. None of us knew who started it. It was just there, passed around like a dare. Looking back, it was a silly poem, something kids made up to scare each other. But even then, it made my spine tighten every time. The rhythm of it felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. We all chanted together, voices blending into the dark. Temptress, temptress, say to me when I count from 1 to 3. Temptress, Temptress, will it be me or those here beside me? 1, 2, 3. We shrieked and laughed as soon as we finished. The kind of laughter you do when you want to release fear without admitting you're afraid. So stupid, Bree said, rolling her eyes. It never works, you're just not chanting hard enough, Lexi shot back, sticking her tongue out at her. The goal, if you could call it that, was to summon what we called the true Salem witch. We called her the Temptress. The story we told each other was that if you said the poem the right way, the Temptress would enter one of you. She would embody someone, like a spirit, putting on a body like a coat. You were never supposed to know who it would be until it happened. We did it again, louder, leaning into the drama like it was a joke. Temptress, Temptress, say to me when I count from 1 to 3. Temptress, Temptress, will it be me or those here beside me? 1, 2, 3, still nothing. No wind, no strange sound, no sign of anything supernatural. We mocked ourselves. We made fun of how cheesy it was. And eventually we crawled into the tents. The details after that are blurred, but there are things I know for sure. Jenna and Bree shared one tent. Lexi and I shared the other. We were still giggling when we zipped ourselves in, whispering about school and boys and stupid rumors. And right before we fell asleep, that was the last time any of us saw Jenna alive. The next part is hard to write, because it's where things stop being childish and start being real. Jenna was dead by morning. Police questioned all 3 of us, me, Lexi, and Bree. They focused on Bree the most, because she'd been in the tent with Jenna. They asked her the same questions again and again, trying to catch her in a lie, trying to force a confession. Bree looked like she couldn't even understand what they were asking. She just kept shaking her head. I didn't touch her, she said. Over and over. I didn't touch her. And then, when they pushed harder, she said only one thing that mattered. It was the Salem witch, she whispered. The Temptress. Nobody took that seriously, of course. They called it grief, shock, a teenager trying to escape blame by making up a story. There was no neat answer, not one that the town ever shared openly. But after that, Bree's family moved out of state, fast, like they were running from something. Lexi and I graduated high school and tried to bury it. We stopped calling ourselves the Salem Witches. We didn't do rituals. We didn't talk about that camping trip. When Jenna's name came up, we got quiet. We told ourselves it was tragedy and trauma, and that childhood was messy. We forgot. Or we tried to. Until the day of the act. It was foggy that day, too, and raining hard, and Lexi jumped out of the car first. I must have hit my head, because everything after that comes in fragments. I remember red and blue emergency lights bouncing through the fog. I remember the taste of metal in my mouth. I remember a voice asking me questions, and me not understanding the words. I remember being cold, even with a blanket on my shoulder. Then it goes blank. The old man died. I hit him with my car. His dog barked. Those are facts. I know them because they told me. I know them because I saw the report. But I can't remember the moment itself, not clearly. My mind keeps slipping away from it like it's coated in oil. Lexi remembered. After the police talked to us and the hospital checked us over, we were allowed to go home. We went back to the duplex, soaked from the rain and exhausted in a way that felt deeper than physical. Lexi was shaking. She barely spoke until we were inside with the door locked. Then she sat me down at the kitchen table like she was about to tell me someone had died. Her eyes were too wide. Her face looked drained. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "He was singing the poem, Sarah," she said. I stared at her. "What poem?" She looked at me like I was pretending, like I was trying to make her feel crazy on purpose. "You know what poem." My skin tightened with chills. "No," I said automatically. "It can't be." Lexi's hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. "Temptress, temptress, stop," I snapped. Too loud, too sharp. I hated myself for it immediately, but fear was rising in me like a wave. "You hit your head, Lexi, that's all." I hit mine too. It's whiplash. I needed it to be whiplash. I needed it to be concussion confusion and trauma and fog and rain and our brains trying to fill in blanks with old memories. That was before I understood how bad it was going to get. Lexi started slipping soon after. At first, it was small things. She missed appointments. She forgot assignments. She didn't go to work at the bar and didn't answer calls. She would stand in the kitchen holding a glass of water and stare at it like she didn't know what it was for. Then it got worse. More than once, police found her wandering in the woods at night, barefoot, not responding to her name, her hair wet with mist, her clothes dirty like she'd fallen. They would bring her home, and she'd look past everyone like she was listening to something farther away than the voices around her. On nights when she stayed home, I'd hear her in her room, quiet at first, just a whisper, like she was talking to herself. Then clearer. Then steady and rhythmic, like she couldn't stop it. "Temptress, temptress, say to me when I count from 1 to 3. Temptress, temptress, will it be me or those here beside me?" 1, 2, 3, the chant would go on, not sung like we did as kids, but spoken like a prayer, like she was answering something. I tried to help her. I drove her to the hospital and demanded scans, tests, anything. I sat in waiting rooms under bright lights that made my migraines throb. Doctors spoke in careful voices. They said they'd never seen that kind of cognitive regression in someone her age without a major cause. They used words like rapid decline and impaired function and long-term care. They told me she needed 24-hour supervision. I remember nodding like I understood, but inside I felt like I was falling. This was my best friend, the person who knew my whole life, the person who had been beside me since we were little girls. And she was disappearing right in front of me, like someone was erasing her from the inside out. I didn't know what to do. Then one day, I made a mistake. A small mistake. The kind you make when you're tired and desperate and running on stress instead of sleep. I left the door unlocked. Lexi was gone before I noticed. By the time I realized the house was too quiet, I found the open door and a trail in the wet grass that led toward the water. They found her belongings near the lake. Lexi had walked into it and never came out. I think that's when the knocking started. Or maybe it had been happening before and I just didn't have the space in my brain to notice. Grief does strange things. Trauma does strange things. Sometimes you only recognize a pattern when it's already wrapped around your throat. After Lexi was gone, the duplex felt too big and too empty. The older couple next door brought over pie again. They knocked and asked if I was okay. I thanked them. I smiled. I ate a slice I could barely taste. I didn't tell them anything real. Because how do you explain that your best friend drowned herself because she couldn't stop chanting a childhood poem? I tried to reach Bree. I searched for her on Facebook and found an account that looked like her. She lives in Arizona now, based on her photos. Bright sun, dry air, smiling beside cactuses and red rock landscapes. I sent her a friend request. She didn't accept it. Maybe she didn't see it. Maybe she did, and she doesn't want to know. Maybe she's been waiting her whole life to never hear the word temptress again. Now it's happening to me too. I know it is. I can't remember the last time I went to work. I wake up in strange places around the house, like I laid down in one room and opened my eyes in another. Sometimes I find muddy footprints by the door and I don't remember going outside. Sometimes my phone is open to notes I don't remember typing. I just read over what I've written so far, and I can't clearly remember writing the first half of it. The words are mine, but they feel like they belong to someone else, like I'm reading a statement someone took from me. And now I hear it again. The knocking. It isn't coming from the neighbor's side. It isn't coming from the front door. It feels closer than sound should feel, like it's inside the walls and inside my skull at the same time. Slow, patient, certain, the temptress is knocking. I know it the way you know a storm is coming before you see it. The air changes. The pressure changes. Something in your body recognizes danger before your mind catches up. My head hurts. My eyes can't focus right. I keep losing time. I keep thinking about the poem, about how we asked back then who it would be. Me or those here beside me. 1, 2, 3. Maybe it was never a game. Maybe it was never harmless. Maybe we weren't summoning anything. Maybe we were volunteering. Maybe we were pointing a finger at ourselves and saying, pick one. The knocking is getting louder now. Not loud in volume, but loud in presence, like the sound has weight. I should not open the door. I know that. But my hand keeps drifting that way anyway, like my body remembers a rule my mind can't access. Like part of me has already decided I should let her in. Story 3, I can't believe I'm here. I don't even know if I'm going to get out. But I need someone to know I was here. I need it written down somewhere outside this building. Because I have a horrible feeling this place doesn't just swallow people. I think it swallows proof, like it can erase you in a way that isn't only physical. If I disappear, I need at least one person to be able to say, yes, she existed, and she tried to tell us. This started a few weeks ago, when I was sitting at home doing what I've basically been doing non-stop for months. Scrolling job listings, refreshing pages, trying different search terms, lowering my standards, then lowering them again. With everything going on in the world, you don't have to guess why I was looking. The job market is brutal. Everywhere is hiring, but nobody calls back. And the places that do call back want to pay you like your time is worthless. I wanted to work. I needed to work. Student loans follow you like a shadow, and medical debt is worse because it feels personal, like you got punished for being sick. I've got both. There's no waiting it out. No, it'll get better when things settle down. Bills don't care about the news. Interest doesn't care if you're trying. So I applied to everything. Waitress, babysitter, dishwasher, cashier, stocker, front desk. Anything that didn't require a full degree, I never got to finish. I have a certificate in 3D arts, one of those, This might help things that ended up not opening many doors. I couldn't afford to finish a full program, and now I'm trapped in that annoying space where you're educated enough to be in debt, but not credentialed enough for people to respect you. I was deep into that routine when I saw the posting. It was for an overnight receptionist at a senior living community in my city, maybe 10 minutes from where I lived. The pay was better than most of the things I'd been seeing, $19.50 an hour, full-time. The shift wording was a little strange Tuesday night through Saturday night, or Sunday morning, something like that, but I didn't care. Overnight work is hard, but it's steady, and it pays the rent. The requirements looked like a long shot. They wanted someone with any degree, and they preferred bilingual. I'm not bilingual. I also don't have a full degree. But I have years of customer service, and I've worked front desks before. I've handled phones, angry people, lost packages, weird late-night calls, cash drawers that didn't balance, the whole thing. I figured I'd apply anyway. Then I kept searching like I hadn't just thrown a bottle into the ocean and hoped it found land. I actually forgot about the application until an email showed up. It was from the community's hiring manager, and it included a link for continued questioning. The email itself felt a little off too formal, too clean, like it was written by a template, but a lot of companies are using automation, AI interviews, AI scheduling, AI screening. I've gotten used to feeling like I'm not talking to a person anymore. I clicked the link. It led to a virtual interview platform. It asked me questions on the screen and had me record myself answering. Things like, why do you want to work here? What do you know about our mission? How would you handle conflict? What are your strengths? Normal interview questions, just with no human on the other side. I recorded my answers and submitted them. Less than an hour later, I got an email that I was hired. Hired just like that. No follow-up call. No we'll be in touch. No meeting. No second round. Just congratulations, welcome to the team. The email said I'd get links for training videos, an appointment time for a drug test, and login details so I could clock in and out for training. My first shift would be the following Tuesday night, 3 days away. It should have made me suspicious. It didn't. I was relieved. I was excited. After months of rejection and silence, it felt like finally something had picked me. The drug test came first. The appointment was already scheduled at a clinic the company used, and all I had to do was show up with ID. The clinic staff seemed like they knew exactly why I was there the moment I walked in, like they did this all the time. I remember the woman at the front desk looking at me the way people look at someone walking into a storm without a coat, not dramatic pity. Just a quick flicker of something on her face that said, oh no, not another one. Then she slid the paperwork to me and told me where to sign. I noticed the look, but I brushed it off. I was too happy about getting hired. I didn't want to ruin it by getting paranoid. Now I can't stop thinking about that look. After the clinic, I went home and logged in to start the training videos. Since I was starting in 3 days, I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to do everything right. The videos felt old. Not just corporate, but outdated. Like they'd been made years ago and nobody bothered to update them. Actors pretending to be caregivers. Dramatic reenactments of seniors with dementia getting upset. A narrator saying things like de-escalation in a cheerful voice, while someone on screen did a fake smile and spoke slowly like the resident was a child. I learned about the place I'd be working at. For privacy, I'm not using the real name. I'll call it WG. The videos said WG had been around since 1999 and was part of a larger network of communities along the eastern seaboard. It all sounded normal. Nothing jumped out at me. Except there was one video that kept buffering at the same spot. It was talking about how WG had the highest rated memory care experience. The video froze and repeated one word again and again. Like a stuck record, memory, memory, memory. At the time, I laughed and restarted it. I figured the site was glitchy. I finished most of the training with no issue. The next day, I tried to relax and get ready for my first overnight shift. I even practiced a phone greeting in the mirror, which sounds ridiculous, but I've answered phones for enough places to know you don't want to slip and say the wrong business. I also did some shopping for work clothes. The dress code email said black or khaki slacks and a WG polo or another nice shirt button-up, blouse, something like that. I had a few things, but I bought a couple new blouses anyway, even though it was an 11 p.m. To 7 a.m. shift, I was still going to be the first person someone saw at the front desk. I wanted to look professional. While I was out, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was formal, like it had been proofread. I'm changing the name in this message because I can't risk making it easy for anyone to trace where I am or what community this was. But the message said, "Hello, this is Laura from WG. I will be your mentor for onboarding. Please bring your documents and a notebook. I will see you at 11. I stared at it for a long second. It was the first time a real human name had been attached to this job. Everything else had been automated. I felt weirdly relieved. Like, okay, so there are actual people involved here. Tuesday night came, and when I arrived, there really was a person. The entrance looked nice. There was an awning over the drive-up area and big sliding doors that opened into a small vestibule. Then there was another set of doors, locked. I stood there for a moment, thinking I'd done something wrong, until someone on the other side appeared and buzzed me in. "Welcome, I'm Laura," she said as soon as I stepped through. "Did you bring the documents I asked you about?" No small talk, no friendly introduction, just straight into business. "Yes," I said quickly, and handed them over. Laura looked like someone who took care of herself even on a night shift. Black slacks, a bright yellow blouse under a gray cardigan, her hair pulled back in a loose, half-up ponytail. She looked warm in a way the building didn't, like a lamp in a dark room. I followed her to the desk. The lobby lights were lowered. The building looked like it was asleep. Laura explained the interior doors locked at 8 p.m. when the sun goes down and stayed locked until 7 a.m. when day staff arrived. "It's to keep bad actors out," she said. Bad actors. That phrase stuck in my head. It sounded like something from a training manual, not like something you'd say naturally. She sat at the desk and started scanning my documents. "While I do this, please put your name on your name tag," she said. "The label maker is in the bottom drawer." I did it. My hands didn't shake yet. I didn't feel afraid yet. It felt like any other onboarding I'd ever done. The next couple of hours were standard training. She showed me the camera system. She showed me how to use Microsoft Teams for the phone calls. She explained which doors stayed locked, where deliveries came in, where the bathroom was, what to do if someone wandered into the lobby. It seemed like a quiet job. Answer calls, watch cameras, help care staff if needed, do rounds. Around 1 a.m., she brought up rounds and introduced something she called the checklist. She didn't hand it to me directly. She just showed me where it was. Whenever you leave the desk for rounds, Laura said, you always take the desk cell phone, the walkie, and the master keys. The door code is hidden under the keyboard. Tonight I'm walking you through. Tomorrow you do it. She showed me where everything was. The phone by the time clock, the walkie in a drawer, the keys under the desk. Easy. Then she said something that didn't fit with the calm tone of training. Now, whenever you leave the desk for any reason, you need to bring these items with you. If you realize halfway down the hall you forgot something, don't go back and get it. I gave her a look. I didn't even mean to. It just came out of me, that automatic expression of, what do you mean, don't go back? For the first time, her face changed. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes flicked away for a moment, like she was listening to something that wasn't there. Then, she forced a professional smile. WG wants us to report rounds within a certain time frame, she said. Backtracking can push your time over. Longer times typically mean problems directors don't want to deal with. I accepted the explanation because it fit corporate logic. Companies love numbers. They love efficiency. They hate incidents. And I'd worked enough jobs to know management cares more about reports than reality. We did the first rounds at 1 a.m. Laura carried the items. She wouldn't let me hold anything yet. She showed me the route, how to check exterior doors quietly, how to jiggle handles without making noise, how to glance into common areas without waking residents. As we walked, she pointed out apartment doors and told me little stories about residents, like she was trying to make the building feel normal. Mr. Smith whistled instead of singing at sing-alongs. Mrs. Harlow should have been in memory care, but her son refused to sign paperwork. She wandered at night. Laura said, if you heard whispering from her room, it meant she was in bed. If there's whispering, she said. We don't worry. Something about that sentence made my skin tighten even then, but I didn't know why. The 1 a.m. rounds took maybe 20 minutes. When we got back to the desk, I noticed a man standing outside at the main entrance. I saw him through the glass in the vestibule. He looked like a delivery driver at first glance. I opened my mouth to ask about it, and Laura put a hand on my shoulder and guided me toward the copy room behind the desk, like she was moving me out of a spotlight. Shouldn't we see who it is? I whispered. Not that one, she said, flat. I stared at her. She didn't look at me while she pulled papers from a cabinet. He dresses like a delivery driver, she said. Right outfit. Wrong details. No company logo. He's one of the bad actors we don't let in. Why haven't we called the police? I asked. I regretted it as soon as the words left my mouth. It sounded naive even to me. Laura finally looked up. The look she gave me wasn't anger. It was something else. A warning that she couldn't say out loud. We've tried, she said slowly. He always ends up gone by the time the police show up. It's best to ignore him. Then she added, in a quieter voice, if you ever see him at night, don't trigger the motion sensor by the door. That's the only way he can get in. My stomach dropped a little. Motion sensor? The door opened with motion. I wanted to ask more, but she stopped talking. When we walked back out to the desk, the man was gone, like he'd never been there. The rest of the night was quiet. A couple of phone calls that Laura showed me how to transfer. She told me the only time we talk with the other building at night is for phone transfers. Why? I started to ask. She cut in gently but firmly. Care staff have their own priorities. You don't want to interrupt them unless it's necessary. At 3 a.m., it was time for the next rounds. Same routine, phone, walkie, keys, door code. Laura still carried everything. But before we left, she had me check a specific camera. The loading dock entrance. What am I looking for? The night vision showed dumpsters, bugs flickering, and the empty shape of the parking area. Nothing unusual. If you don't see anything, we're good, Laura said. Let's go. That was all she gave me. We took the opposite route from the 1 a.m. rounds, just like she'd said we should. On the way, I noticed something odd. Some of the apartment numbers felt like they repeated, like I'd just seen the same number 2 doors ago. I blinked, and they looked correct again. I told myself it was just the overnight shift messing with me. I wasn't used to being awake at this hour. The lights were low. The hallways were long and similar. Then we reached apartment 329. Laura had me test the handle. When I did, it moved. Unlocked before I could react, a faint voice came through the door. Is that the knitting needles I ordered? Laura's face drained so fast it looked like a light had been turned off inside her. She locked the door quickly, her hands moving like this wasn't the first time. No. Laura whispered toward the door, like she didn't want the person inside to hear her voice clearly. No knitting club today. Mrs. Lyra then. She waved me forward, almost shoving me down the hall. A few doors later, she was still pale. I looked at her, and she forced a small smile. That resident has her days mixed up, she said. She got her needles weeks ago. The club was canceled. Her door is always unlocked on these rounds. If she talks to you, just remind her there's no club today, and keep moving. What if the door is locked and she still answers? I asked. Laura opened her mouth to reply, and then the walkie crackled. The sound that came through wasn't clear words. It was like someone pressing a microphone against fabric, then breathing into it. A soft, wet static. Laura clicked the walkie off immediately. Then she turned it back on, changed it to channel 2, and clipped it back to her belt like nothing had happened. She didn't answer my question. Those rounds took 30 minutes. When we got back, she showed me how to log the rounds on the computer. Then she sat me back down with training videos and made sure I stayed awake. Every time my eyes started to close, she nudged me lightly, like she couldn't afford to let me drift. At some point, around 4:40, she showed me where to get coffee from the small cafe near the desk. As we walked back, I swear I saw a shadow move at the edge of my vision, close to the wall. When I turned my head, there was nothing there, just the hallway and the dim light. By 5 a.m., I was counting down the minutes until morning staff arrived. At 5:30 a.m., we did the final rounds. Same process again, but this time Laura let me choose the route. I chose the 1 a.m. route because it felt more familiar. We passed Mr. Smith's door. We passed Mrs. Harlow's door. I stopped, listening for whispering like Laura had taught me. I didn't hear it. I looked at Laura, waiting for her reaction. She's probably wandering, Laura said, like she expected this. Just make sure her door is locked and keep going. She knows the way back. I checked the lock. It was already locked. Right before we got back to the desk, I saw a woman near the lobby. She wore a nightgown. Her mouth moved like she was talking to someone I couldn't see, like she was stuck in a conversation with air. The building was so quiet that I almost didn't notice her at all. When we sat down at the desk, I heard her voice, soft and thin. "Are you here to help me, Jane?" It took me a second to register that she was talking to us. I started to open my mouth and correct her. My name isn't Jane when Laura spoke first. "Yes," Laura said calmly. "I will meet you at your door." That was enough. The woman nodded like it made sense and shuffled away. I stared after her. Why didn't we correct her? Laura's expression didn't change. "It's just a thing for overnight staff," she said. "We don't want to confuse residents. If they think we're someone else, it's best to let them believe it." That part, at least, lined up with dementia training. Meet them where they are. Don't force reality. Don't argue. By the time morning staff arrived, I was exhausted, but I felt like I'd survived something. Laura showed me how to prep the desk for the day shift. Then she asked if I had any questions. I asked where to find the checklist tomorrow so I could practice with it. She showed me. I packed my notebook. I turned back to say goodbye. She was already gone. The outside door was sliding. All of that was last night. Tonight was my second shift. I expected Laura to be there waiting in the vestibule, ready to train me again, ready to explain the parts that felt strange. Instead, I arrived to a locked door and an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter. It was polite and professional, like the emails, but something about it made my skin crawl. It addressed me as Silent, which isn't my name. It's my online username, the name I use when I don't want to be found. It thanked me for choosing WG as my new home for your career and gave me my after-hours door code. It said second shift had already gone home, but going forward I would swap with them at 11 p.m. It told me to find onboarding paperwork in the top left drawer in the copy room and fill it out between rounds. It told me the round checklist was in the right drawer at the desk, and everything you need to know will be on that paper. If I had questions, email my supervisor. If an emergency arose, follow normal emergency procedures. That was it. No mention of Laura. No mention that I'd be alone. No call if you need anything. Just a code and a checklist and a casual assumption that nothing could possibly go wrong. I used the code and let myself in. The building looked the same: dim lobby, quiet halls, locked interior doors, but without Laura, it felt colder, like the warmth I'd mistaken for safety had been a person, not a place. I found the paperwork and sat at the desk, filling things out. I got focused on it, trying to do it carefully, trying to prove I could handle this job. I looked up at the clock and saw 1:15 a.m. I'd missed my first rounds. Panic hit me like a jolt. I grabbed the checklist from the drawer, the one Laura had shown me, the one the letter promised would tell me everything. It did, but not in Laura's voice. Not with little stories and gentle explanations. It was cold, strict, almost threatening in how it was written. Bring the phone. Bring the walkie. Bring the keys. Set the walkie to channel. Do not return to the desk before completing a round. Log your time immediately. I read the line about not returning to the desk before completing a round and felt my throat go tight. I grabbed the phone, the walkie, the keys, and the door code. My hands were clumsy. The plastic of the walkie felt slick, like it didn't want to be held. Then I started my 1 a.m. Rounds late, the hallway stretching ahead of me, with that quiet that feels like pressure. The building was quieter than last night. Too quiet. Even the vents seemed softer. Every tiny sound, my shoes, my jacket shifting, The faint creak of the floor made me jump. I took the same route Laura had taken me on. I headed toward Mrs. Harlow's area, even though I didn't know why I felt pulled there. Maybe because it was the only part of the building that felt familiar. Maybe because I wanted the whispering to be in the right place, so I could pretend this was normal. As I got close to her door, I felt relief because I heard whispering. Then I realized it wasn't coming from inside her room. It was behind me. My body went rigid. My blood felt like ice, instant, and I forced myself to keep breathing quietly through my nose. Like if I made too much sound, something would know I'd heard it. Laura had said, "Lock the door and keep moving. Don't linger." I reached for the lock on Mrs. Harlow's door with shaking fingers, telling myself I was just doing the checklist, just securing a resident, just being responsible. And then the whisper came again, closer, right behind my ear. "You are late, Laura." I made a small sound I couldn't stop, a tiny gasp. My whole body reacted like the whisper had touched. I turned around. No one was there. Just the hallway, the dim light, the long line of doors, the quiet. And then I saw her at the end of the hall, the woman in the nightgown from last night, the one who'd asked about Jane. She moved slowly, like her joints weren't quite connected right. Her lips shifted like she was talking, but I couldn't hear anything at first. My heart hammered. I should have done what Laura did. I should have answered like I was Laura, like I was Jane, like I was whoever she needed me to be. Instead, I did the stupid, honest thing, the thing you do when you still believe you're dealing with a person. I'm not Laura," I said, forcing the words out. "I'm silent." The moment I said it, dread washed over me so hard I almost felt dizzy. Like I'd just broken a rule I didn't know existed until I broke it. The woman's body twitched, not like a normal flinch, like a glitch, like a puppet tugged by a rough string. Her hand lifted slowly, reaching toward me. I stepped back, and in that step, I understood what I'd done. I didn't just correct her. I didn't just confuse a resident. I refused the role she needed me to play. And the air in the hallway changed like something had taken note. The woman looked up at me fully, and her eyes met mine. They didn't look like confused eyes. They didn't look like lost, older eyes. They looked empty, not blank empty, like holes. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran. I sprinted down the hall, took the stairs 2 at a time, and grabbed the handle of the first door I could reach. A supply. I slipped inside and shut it, locking it with hands that didn't feel like mine. Then I turned the lights off and crouched in the dark, trying to make myself smaller, trying to make myself quiet. It's not even 2 a.m. on my second night, and I already messed up. I'm sitting on the floor in here with my knees up, holding my phone so close to my face I can barely see the screen. My legs burn. My chest hurts. My breathing is loud in my own ears, and I'm terrified it's loud outside, too. I can hear her out there sometimes. Slow footsteps. A soft shuffle. The faint sound of... And then her whisper, sliding under the door like smoke. She keeps saying my name. Not Laura. Not Jane. Silent. It's like she's trying to coax me out. Like she's patient. Like she knows she has all night. I don't even know if it's her. I don't know if it's a resident or something else wearing a residence shaped the way people wear clothes. I don't know what rules apply in this building. And I don't know what happens to people who break them. The checklist said I can't go back to the desk until I finish my round. But how am I supposed to finish my round when I'm hiding in a closet with my heart trying to punch through my ribs? I can't call the police. I don't even know what I would say. Hi, I'm locked in a supply closet at a senior living facility because a woman in a nightgown whispered at me and her eyes looked like voids. They would think I'm on drugs or having a breakdown or both. And there's something else. Behind me, inside the closet, I keep hearing a soft crinkling sound, like plastic shifting, like something wrapped moving slightly. It's been happening off and on since I got in here, and I've been forcing myself not to turn around. Because the closet is supposed to be full of supplies. Linens, paper towels, gloves, trash bags. But the way the sound comes and goes doesn't feel like a bag settling. It feels like breathing, except it's not a breath. It's the sound of something adjusting itself in the dark. I don't know what I signed up for. I don't know what WG really is, or why Laura looked scared when she told me not to go back for forgotten items, or why the clinic lady pitied me, or why that training video got stuck repeating memory like it was trying to warn me. All I know is I am here, right now, in a dark closet, and something outside is whispering my name like it's practicing it. If I disappear, if I don't make it out, I need this to exist somewhere. I need someone to remember me. And I need to figure out whether the crinkling behind me is just trash bags or the last thing I'm going to hear. Story 4, we started the evening the way we usually did when things were going well, with me ordering a bottle of expensive Merlot before Monica even had to open the wine menu. Monica liked it when I did that. She said she found menus stressful, but I always took it as a compliment, like she trusted me to make the right choices for both of us. After 6 months together, I felt like I'd learned her tastes perfectly. I knew what she liked to drink, what she liked to eat, what kinds of places made her relax. I knew the version of her that belonged to me. The bottle arrived chilled, beaded with cold water. Our servers set it down with the label facing us like a little presentation. We were at our usual table on the rooftop deck, the one with a clean view of the city skyline. Below us, the streets glittered with headlights, and the air up there was warm, but less heavy than it was at street level. A few small lanterns hung along the railing, giving the deck a soft, romantic glow. As the server poured, I tipped my glass and tried to sound casual, like I hadn't been waiting all week for this exact kind of night. Did you know Merlot is French for blackbird? I asked. I didn't know if it was true, but I'd seen it somewhere, and it sounded right. Monica liked little facts like that. She liked the feeling of learning something without having to do any work. I did not know that, she said, and gave me the look she always gave when she was pleased with me, warm, attentive, like I'd brought her a gift. I didn't say anything about the rest of the label because I couldn't have explained it if she asked. I could usually fake it, though. I've always been good at picking up on clues and sounding confident. If she pressed me, I would have found a way to make it sound like I knew more than I did. I swirled my glass and let the smell rise. Speaking of birds, I said, leaning back in my chair, I read something interesting the other day. There was a study that found city birds are more afraid of women than men. You'd think it would be the other way around. Monica lifted her eyebrows. Who pays for those studies? She asked. Then she did something that caught my attention. She broke off a piece of bread from the basket between us. Monica didn't eat bread. She barely ate anything starchy at all. I'd made a note of that early on. She was careful, disciplined, the kind of woman who could order a salad and actually mean it. But she didn't bring it to her mouth. She crumbled it between her fingers and sprinkled the crumbs near her chair, letting them fall under the table. I watched, amused. "Seems like you have no trouble endearing yourself," I said. A small sparrow hopped over from somewhere near the railing, moving in quick, cautious steps. It tilted its head, eyeing the crumbs, and pecked once, then again. It didn't fly away. It stayed close to her. I smirked. "Guess I'm dating a real-life Disney princess." Monica laughed softly. "Maybe if one lands on me, you can say that," she said. "Or if I spontaneously break into song." "I'd kind of like to hear that," I replied. She scrunched her nose in a way I found genuinely adorable. "Take me out to karaoke next time." Next time, that phrase landed in my chest like a promise. I pictured a future with her so easily, it almost scared me. Monica across from me, city lights behind her, making jokes, feeding a bird like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt that rush of certainty you get when you think you've found the person who makes your life make sense. I was going to marry her. I was sure of it in that moment, watching her focus on that sparrow the way other couples stared at their phones. It helped, too, that she didn't treat dates like a shopping spree. She didn't order the most expensive thing just because she could. She didn't pile her plate. Half the time, it looked like she barely ate at all. I took it as another sign of her self-control, her elegance. "Hey," I said, still smiling, "I'm going to use the restroom real quick." I set my napkin aside and stood. Monica looked up from the bird and beamed at me. The light from the lanterns caught in her eyes. For a second, I had the urge to do something special flag down our waiter. Quietly ask if they could make a little fuss for her. Maybe pretend it was her birthday. I'd seen restaurants do that. The servers always looked like they were having fun clapping and singing. They got called to different tables all the time, 5 or 6 times a night sometimes. I'd never worked in the service industry, but it seemed like a job where you got to be part of people's happy moments. I didn't see our server on the way to the bathroom. The restaurant was busy, and the doorway to the rooftop deck was crowded with people coming and going, laughing, stepping aside, holding drinks carefully. I did what I needed to do, washed my hands, and headed back out. On my way back, I slowed at the entrance to the deck. Monica was still alone at our table, exactly where I'd left. The view behind her was turning darker as the sun sank lower. The lantern light made her face look soft and calm, like a portrait. But her hands were raised. At first I thought she had her phone out. That would have made sense. Monica was the kind of person who didn't scroll constantly, but she did check her messages. Then I realized she wasn't holding a phone. She was holding a sparrow. It was in her hand like a tiny bundle, feathers pressed flat. Her fingers were wrapped around it firmly, and with her other hand she was stroking the top of its head with one fingertip, slow and gentle, like she was soothing it. The bird's eyes were half closed. For one strange second, it almost looked like it was relaxed, like it trusted her so much it was letting itself be handled. Then I noticed the small tremor in its body, the way its wings twitched like it wanted to pull away but couldn't. A thin uneasiness crawled over my skin. I tried to shake it off. Maybe the bird had hurt itself and she was helping it. Maybe it had flown into something and she'd picked it up. People did that sometimes, right? My first instinct was to walk over and say something light, something joking like, "Hey." save some wildlife for the rest of us. Instead, I found myself standing back, watching. I even smiled, because I wanted the moment to be what it looked like. Monica looked peaceful. The image of her holding a tiny bird fit the story I'd built in my head about her. My girlfriend, the gentle one, the one who liked facts and calm rooftops and soft laughter. The Disney princess. Monica brought the bird closer to her face. I assumed she was going to kiss it, like a quick peck before letting it go. That idea made my stomach tighten a little. All I could think about were germs, what birds carried, what could be on their feet, what could be in their feathers. Then the bird started struggling. Not a little twitch, but a real panic. Its wings flapped hard. Its body writhed in her fist, and Monica's grip tightened. I saw her knuckles whiten, her skin bleaching under the pressure. She opened her mouth. At first, I expected her to say something, maybe laugh at the bird squirming, maybe call to me when she realized I was back. But she didn't speak. Her lips parted wider than they should have. Wider, and then wider still, like her jaw wasn't stopping where a jaw normally stops. It looked like it was stretching, unhooking, I watched, frozen, as her mouth opened in a way that didn't fit a human face. Strings of saliva caught between her teeth and stretched thin, glittering in the lantern light. The top of her head seemed to tilt back, her neck bending as if she needed more space. For a sick moment, it looked like her skull was shifting, making room for what she was about to do. The sparrow gave one last frantic struggle. Then its head disappeared into Monica's mouth. My mind simply refused it. That's the only way I can describe it. It was like watching something that wasn't allowed to happen in the world, something your brain has no file for. There was no category for it, so my thoughts stalled out completely. Monica didn't swallow it in one motion. Even though God helped me, it looked like she could have. Her teeth moved, and I saw then that they were longer than I'd ever noticed. Not cartoon vampire fangs, something worse, because it looked natural on her, like it had always been there, and I'd just never looked closely enough. Her jaws worked with calm purpose. She bit down and tore. The bird's head separated from its body with a wet, quick jerk, like she was snapping something small from a stem. The motion reminded me of a painting I'd once described to Monica on our first date, trying to impress her Saturn devouring his sun. That old Goya image, brutal and impossible to forget. Monica had listened closely that night, eyes bright, like I'd given her something she wanted. I'd taken that as a sign she liked a man with culture. Standing there now, watching her, I realized I'd been proud of the wrong things. She opened her mouth again. It wasn't dramatic this time. It was automatic, like the first part had been the hard part, and now she was simply finishing a task. Her tongue moved in a way that didn't look right, pushing the rest of the bird inward. The bird's body was still flapping. I don't know how. The wings beat against her lips for a second, before sliding inside. Her jaw snapped shut. Monica swallowed. I watched the lump move under the skin of her throat, traveling downward. The outline of it shifted beneath her collar. She wore a neat dress with a crisp collar, almost like something from a catalog, the kind that made her look sweet and harmless. The movement continued until it disappeared under the fabric, leaving nothing behind except the way she pressed her lips together as if she'd just eaten something that stuck in her teeth. I thought about running. I've never dined and dashed in my life. I've never even left a bad date without paying my share. But my brain threw out those normal rules like they didn't matter anymore. I was in danger, and the only thing that mattered was distance. But I didn't move. My vision narrowed, and my body did what the bird had done in her hand. It stopped fighting, stopped thinking, went still. Fight or flight gave way to something else. Freeze. I stood there with my heart pounding and my hands numb, unable to choose either direction. Monica glanced up and saw me. The moment her eyes met mine, I knew there would be no slipping away unnoticed. If I turned and ran, she'd see it. If I backed into the restaurant, she'd watch me do it. I had no idea what she would do next, and that uncertainty held me in place like a rope. So I did the only thing that felt possible. I walked back to the table. Each step felt strange, like I was walking into a scene that had already been written. Monica's face had returned to normal. Her mouth was closed. Her expression was pleasant, almost curious, like she was waiting to see if I'd mention what I'd just witnessed. I sat down. My hands were sweating. My mouth was dry. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my throat. Monica's eyes stayed on me, steady and calm. Within moments, our server appeared, as if summoned. He smiled and asked if we were ready to order. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the server and tell him to call the police, to look at Monica, to look at her mouth, to look at the table, anything. But my voice wouldn't cooperate, and my fear had an ugly logic. If I made a scene, I would be alone with her attention. Monica picked up her menu like nothing had happened and closed it after barely glancing. "Just the house salad," she said, with dressing on the side. I stared at her mouth. Something was caught between her teeth, a small, dark piece that didn't belong. She noticed my stare. Her lips closed quickly, and her jaw shifted. For a second, her lower lip bulged outward in a strange way, like her tongue was pushing something around inside her cheek. She worked at it patiently, her expression playful, almost flirty, like she was doing a trick. Then, she used 2 fingers to pluck the piece free. She placed it neatly beside her plate. She leaned forward slightly and smiled. "You know what they say about girls who can tie cherry stems into knots with their tongues?" she said softly, eyes glittering. "They don't say they're Disney princesses." I made a small noise that might have been agreement. "Uh-huh," I managed. The thing she'd set beside her plate definitely wasn't a cherry stem. When our entrees arrived, I watched her sip her wine and move leaves around her salad like she was eating. Like this was all normal. She talked easily, even warmly, asking me about my day, telling me a story about a coworker, laughing at the right moments. She was so good at it that if you hadn't seen what I'd seen, you might have thought she was the most pleasant woman on the rooftop. I couldn't touch my food. My chicken parmesan sat in front of me, steaming. The smell of tomato and cheese suddenly my stomach kept tightening and releasing in waves. I tried to keep my face steady, but I could feel my eyes flicking around like a trapped animal. I started looking at the other tables. I noticed that a lot of the women were eating the same thing Monica ordered, house salad, dressing on the side. It could have been coincidence. It could have been a popular menu item. But once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. Plate after plate. The same greens. The same little cup of dressing placed off to the side like a... I also noticed the way some of them looked at me. Not openly. Not long stares. Quick glances that slid away the moment I met their eyes. The kind of glance that makes you feel like you've walked into a room where everyone knows something you don't. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the deck was lit mostly by the lanterns and the glow from inside the restaurant. Shadows stretched longer. The city below looked farther away. The air felt cooler against my skin. There were no birds under the tables anymore. That struck me hard. Earlier, there had been at least one sparrow hopping around. Now there were none. Not at our table, not at the railing, not anywhere I could see. It was like they'd all decided to leave at the same time. Monica kept talking, and I kept nodding, barely hearing her. At some point, I realized she'd asked me a question and was waiting for an answer. "What?" I said, too sharply. Monica didn't look offended. She looked patient, like a teacher repeating a lesson for a slow student. "I was just thinking," she said, "when we move in together, we should set up a bird feeder. Or a bird house. Maybe even a bird bath. We can make it really welcoming for all the urban birds in the neighborhood." My throat tightened. I could barely swallow. "That way," she continued, her voice light, "they'll know I'm not something they need to be afraid of." "Uh-huh," I said again, because it was the only sound I could get out without breaking. Monica smiled and dabbed her mouth with the corner of her napkin. She shifted slightly, and for a moment it looked like she was uncomfortable, like she had indigestion, the polite kind of discomfort someone has after eating too fast. I pushed my chair back without meaning to. My body was trying to stand up on its own, trying to escape even if my mind was still frozen. "I think I need to use the "I started." I didn't finish. A crowd formed around our table so quickly, it felt like the air filled up with people in an instant. Chairs scraped. Shadows moved. My space disappeared. I sat back down hard, trapped on all sides by bodies and smiling faces. Someone slid a slice of cake in front of me, setting it right beside my untouched meal. Before I could react, a group of servers appeared and began clapping and singing in perfect unison. Their voices rose together, cheerful and loud, drowning out everything else. Hands reached toward. Someone looped an elastic band under my chin and pulled it tight enough to sting. A cone-shaped party hat landed on my head, slightly crooked. I looked up, wide-eyed, trying to find a way out, trying to find a face that looked confused or concerned. But everyone around me was smiling. Everyone was clapping. Everyone was watching me like I was the center of something planned. Monica leaned forward, delighted, her eyes shining. "When you were in the bathroom earlier," she said brightly, loud enough to be heard over the song, "I told them it was your birthday." Her voice had that playful excitement like she'd done something sweet. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard my fingers hurt. I could feel sweat running down my back. The servers kept singing. The crowd kept clapping. And Monica kept smiling at me like she'd just given me exactly what I wanted. Like this noise, this attention, this trap was a gift. I sat there wearing the stupid hat, staring at the cake, listening to the clapping, and thinking about the way that Sparrow had struggled in her hand and how quickly it had gone quiet. Story 5, I was 19 when I decided to spend my summer break in Ohio. I told people it was for a change of scenery, a cheap adventure before real adulthood started. The truth was simpler. I needed to get away from home for a while, and I didn't have much money. Ohio was close enough to feel manageable and far enough to feel like an escape. I rented a small basement apartment in an old house in the suburbs of Toledo. The listing made it sound harmless. Private entrance, it said, like that was a luxury. Quiet neighborhood. Friendly owners. The owners were an elderly couple named Arthur and Marlene. I met them once, briefly, when I signed the paperwork and got the key. They seemed ordinary in the way older couples can seem ordinary soft voices, polite smiles, a little too eager to show they were nice. The basement apartment had its own side entrance, separate from the main house, and it really did feel isolated. There was no interior door connecting me to them, no shared hallway, just a set of outdoor steps that went down along the side of the house, ending at a plain door that opened into my little space. The yard around the house was neglected, not in a charming way, like wildflowers and tall grass, but in an uncared-for way. Patchy weeds, dirt showing through in bald spots, bushes that had grown into the shape of themselves, messy and sharp. The fence leaned in places like it had gotten tired of holding itself up. Inside, the apartment was exactly what you'd expect for cheap rent. Low ceilings, small windows near ground level that made the sunlight look thin and tired. A combined living area and kitchenette. A tiny bathroom with an old fan that rattled when it ran. My bedroom was barely big enough for the bed and a narrow walkway. There was one heavy wooden wardrobe bolted against the wall in the living area, probably because whoever owned it before didn't trust it not to tip. The first week was normal. Boring, even. I unpacked my clothes, bought groceries, figured out the bus routes. I spent a lot of time reading and scrolling online, letting the days pass slowly, the way summer days do when you don't have plans. The humidity in Toledo was intense. It made the air feel thick, like you had to push through it when you walked outside. Most afternoons, the neighborhood went quiet because people stayed indoors with fans and air conditioning, waiting for the heat to break. At the beginning of the second week, that quiet started to feel different. Not peaceful, not calm, empty. It was the kind of silence where you become too aware of your own breathing, your own footsteps, the small sounds your body makes without you thinking about it. The kind of silence where you start noticing things you would normally ignore. That's when I first heard it. It came from the far corner of the living area, right behind the wardrobe. A faint scratching sound, steady and slow, like something was moving carefully behind the wall. At first, I shrugged it off. Old houses have mice. Old houses have raccoons in the attic and squirrels in the walls and pipes that knock and creak like they're trying to speak. But this didn't sound like mice. It was heavier, slower, deliberate in a way that made my skin tighten. And it didn't happen at night. It didn't happen randomly. It always started at exactly 1 p.m. The first time, I checked my phone because I thought I was imagining the timing. I sat very still, watching the clock on the screen, and when it hit 1 p.m., the scratching began, like someone had been waiting for a signal. It continued for 1 full hour, never speeding up, never slowing down, and then it stopped all at once at exactly 2 p.m. No fading out, no last little scurry, just silence, like whatever was back there had simply decided it was finished. The next day, it happened again. 1 p.m. on the dot. 1 hour, then nothing. By the third day, I was unsettled enough that I started leaving the apartment in the afternoons. I'd go to a coffee shop, a bookstore, anywhere with other people and other sounds. But even then, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept picturing something crouched behind the drywall, waiting for its time slot like it had a schedule. And because I couldn't leave well enough alone, I eventually decided to investigate. I told myself it was just mice, and if I found where they were getting in, I could do something about it. Set traps, seal a hole, ask Arthur and Marlene to call pest control. Anything. The wardrobe was heavy, and because it was fixed to the wall, moving it felt like doing something I wasn't supposed to do. I had to wedge my fingers behind it and pull, shifting it inch by inch. The wood scraped against the floor with a low groan, and dust puffed out from behind it in little clouds. My arms shook by the time I'd moved it far enough to see the wall. The moment the wall was exposed, a cold chill ran through me, sudden and sharp. It didn't make sense. Basements can be cool, sure, but this felt like the temperature had dropped in one concentrated spot, like the wall itself held cold the way a freezer does. There was a small square cut into the wooden paneling behind the wardrobe. Neat edges, like someone had measured carefully. Over it was a piece of cardboard, taped down with old duct tape that had yellowed and dried at the edges. I stood there for a long moment, staring. That's what bothered me most. It didn't look like a mistake or damage. It looked intentional, like someone had built a door and then pretended it wasn't there. I peeled the cardboard back slowly. The duct tape made a dry, tearing sound that seemed too loud in the quiet apartment. As soon as the last edge came loose, a smell burst out so strong I actually stepped back. It was old dust, thick and stale, mixed with something sharp and burnt, like sulfur, like someone had struck a match and held it too long. It filled my nose and throat and made my eyes water. I turned on my phone flashlight and aimed it into the opening. I expected pipes, wires, a crawl space full of insulation and old spider webs, something normal. Instead, I saw a narrow tunnel, not a vertical drop, not a utility gap, a horizontal passage extending under the foundation of the house. The inside looked dark and tight, the kind of space you'd have to crawl through on your stomach. My first thought was that it couldn't be real, that I had to be misreading what I was seeing. But the light showed the tunnel walls clearly enough to remove any doubt. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't open earth. It looked lined. Wood, maybe, or old paneling, like someone had built it instead of dug it. My heart was beating too fast, and I had that stupid urge people get in horror movies where they do the exact thing they shouldn't do. I leaned in. I put my head closer to the opening and shined the light farther down, trying to see where it ended. The beam stretched a few meters until it hit a bend or a narrowing, and right before it vanished into black, I saw something on the floor of the tunnel. A child's sneaker, blue, badly faded, coated in a thick layer of dust. The sight made my breath catch so hard my chest actually hurt. For a second, my mind tried to force a normal explanation. Maybe it had fallen through a crack years ago. Maybe there used to be kids in the house and they lost a shoe. Then my light shifted a little, and I saw a long strand of blonde hair lying thin and pale against the dusty floor. Not attached to anything, just there, like someone had cut it off or ripped it out. Then I noticed the postage stamps scattered around the sneaker. Old stamps, the kind you lick and stick on envelopes. The designs looked like something from the 1980s. I stared at those objects like they were arranged on purpose for me to find, like a message. My skin prickled, my mouth went dry, and then the power cut out. Not a flicker, not a dimming, just gone. The lamp in the corner died. The little hum of the fridge stopped. The apartment fell into thick darkness, the kind that presses against your eyes. My phone flashlight was still on, but in that moment, it felt weak, like a toy compared to the black around it. I heard something from inside the tunnel, a deep, wet inhale, like someone very close to me drawing breath through a throat full of liquid. I froze so hard my muscles ached. Then, right in front of my face, from inside that darkness, a child's voice whispered. Warm, close, shaking with fear. Please, it said, put the cover back before he wakes up. Every hair on my body lifted. My stomach turned cold. I scrambled backward so fast I slammed into the wardrobe with my spine, hard enough to make me see white sparks. I couldn't get enough air. I was hyperventilating, panicking, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I grabbed the cardboard and slapped it back over the opening. My fingers fumbled with the duct tape, tearing off strips, pressing them down, smoothing them with frantic, clumsy motions. I taped it like my life depended on it, because in that moment, it felt like it did. Then I shoved the wardrobe back into place, pushing with everything I had until it blocked the wall. Only after it was covered did I realize I was shaking from head to toe. I didn't even stop to think. I went up the outdoor steps 2 at a time and headed to the main house entrance. I needed an adult explanation. I needed Arthur to tell me it was an old heating duct or a forgotten crawl space. I needed him to say, kids used to play down there. Anything, I knocked hard. Again and again. When Arthur finally opened the door, he was wearing gardening overalls. Dirt smudged the knees. His hands looked damp, like he'd been working in the yard even though it was late. He looked tired, older than I remembered, and his eyes had a strange heaviness to them. I started talking too fast, spilling everything at once. Strange noises, a hidden opening, a tunnel, a shoe, the smell. The moment I mentioned the opening, his face changed. It wasn't subtle. His expression didn't shift slowly into concern. It snapped into something else entirely. The warmth vanished. The kindness drained away. He looked at me with a flat, dead stare that made me feel like I'd made myself an enemy without meaning to. His voice, when he spoke, was sharp and dry. That opening is for maintaining the old heating pipes. I stared at him. But there weren't any pipes. His jaw tightened. Do not mess with it again, he said, each word clipped. If you do, I will terminate your lease immediately. I tried to speak, but he didn't give me time. He slammed the door in my face so hard the frame rattled. I stood there on the porch for a second, rain, sweat, humidity sticking to my skin, my heart still. My mind kept replaying the whisper, that terrified child voice, like it had burned itself into the inside of my skull. I went back down to the basement apartment and locked the door behind me. Then I checked the locks again. Then I sat on my bed and stared at the wall, listening. That night, I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I jolted awake, convinced I'd heard something. The apartment felt too still, like it was holding its breath. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint vibration. Not a sound exactly, more like the floor was humming. For a second, I thought it was my phone buzzing on the mattress, but it wasn't. It was coming from the kitchenette. The refrigerator was making a strange shifting noise, like it was being moved very slowly. I got up with my heart pounding and turned on the living room light with trembling fingers. The bulb flickered, then held. I stepped toward the kitchen and froze. The fridge wasn't moving on its own. There was a small crack in the hardwood floor directly beneath it, a gap that hadn't been there before, or if it had, I hadn't noticed it. And reaching up through that crack were fingers, human fingers. They were incredibly pale, long and thin, and they had no fingernails. Not broken nails, not bitten nails. Just smooth ends, like the nails had never existed. The fingers were moving slowly, feeling around, searching, and then they found the fridge's power cord. With careful, patient motion, they began trying to pull it down into the crack, like someone below the floor wanted to unplug it. My throat opened, and a scream came out before I could stop. In an instant, the fingers snapped back down into the crack with unnatural speed. The silence after was heavy, like the air had thickened. I stood there shaking, listening for movement below the floor. Nothing. After a long moment, I forced myself closer. I crouched and aimed my phone flashlight into the gap. I expected darkness, maybe dirt or pipes. Instead, I saw papers, a massive pile of papers and old photographs scattered below, crammed into a space that shouldn't exist beneath a simple basement floor. The flashlight beam caught glossy edges, curled corners, images layered on images like someone had been collecting them for years. I swallowed hard and shifted the light, trying to make out what I was seeing. There were pictures of missing children, newspaper clippings, printed flyers, old-school photos, faces staring back from another decade. Some of the papers looked aged and yellow, like they'd been handled 1,000 times. And there, among them, was a photo of a little boy wearing blue sneakers. My breath caught so sharply, it hurt. I didn't have time to think beyond that, because suddenly something moved in the crack. A single wide eye rose into view from below, huge and glossy in the beam of my flashlight. It stared straight up at me. It blinked slowly, like it wasn't surprised to see me, like it knew I'd eventually look. Then I heard a new sound, a sharp scratching, right under the floorboard. Fast, purposeful, moving. It wasn't coming from the crack anymore. It was traveling beneath my feet, the scrape-scratch of something dragging itself along the underside of the wooden planks. It was heading toward my bedroom. That was the moment I stopped trying to understand. Fear turned clean and simple. Get out. I ran to my room and threw the essentials into a backpack, without wallet, keys, phone charger, whatever clothes my hands grabbed. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't pack logically. I packed like a person escaping a fire. Then I went to the side door. When I stepped outside, it was almost 4 a.m. A thick fog sat over the neighborhood, heavy and suffocating, like the air was wet wool. The streetlights turned it into glowing patches of gray. The world beyond the yard disappeared. The quiet felt staged, like a set built to look normal. I walked fast, then faster, heading toward the nearest bus stop about a quarter-mile away. I kept glancing behind me, expecting to see movement in the fog, expecting to hear that scratching follow me onto the street. No cars passed. No lights turned on in nearby houses. It was like I was the only person awake in the entire suburb. The first bus that arrived felt like a rescue. I got on without even checking the route signs. I rode straight to the airport, bought the first ticket I could afford, and got on a flight back to my hometown as soon as possible. For a few days after I returned, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the sneaker in the tunnel, the stamps, the pale fingers reaching for the cord. My brain kept replaying the whisper, "Put the cover back before he wakes up." It sounded like a warning meant for someone else that I'd accidentally overheard. And those pictures wouldn't let me rest. My conscience ate. If those were real missing children, if there was even a chance someone was down there, I couldn't just leave and pretend it wasn't my problem. I kept imagining parents still waiting for answers decades later, never knowing what happened. So I called the Lucas County Sheriff's Office. I filed a detailed report telling them everything I had seen: the hidden opening behind the wardrobe, the tunnel, the smell, the shoe, the hair, the stamps, the fingers, the crack under the fridge, the photographs below the floorboards. I expected to be dismissed. I expected a tired deputy to tell me it was probably rodents and an overactive imagination. They didn't dismiss me. They took it seriously enough to send a unit to the house. 2 days later, a detective called me. His voice sounded strained, like he'd aged 10 years since he dialed the number. "We raided the house," he said. "Arthur and his wife were found dead in their bed." My mind went blank. I couldn't make the words fit together. "They've been dead for at least 2 weeks," he continued. "Gas poisoning, which means they were rotting in that house the entire time you were staying there." I couldn't breathe, for then my brain caught on one detail like a hook. I heard myself speak in a voice that didn't sound like mine. "Then who was the man I talked to?" The detective was quiet for a beat. When he spoke again, his tone was worse, lower, frightened in a way professionals try to hide. "When we moved the wardrobe," he said, "we didn't find heating pipes." He paused, like he was choosing his words carefully, or like he didn't want the words to exist at all. "We found a massive network of narrow, dark, wood-lined tunnels running under the house," he said. "Not just under the house, under the neighborhood." I sat down without realizing I was moving. "We found belongings of missing children dating back to the 80s, he went on. "We found secret passages that led into walls, hidden access points behind paneling." And he exhaled hard. "We uncovered spaces in the tunnels directly under neighbors' bedrooms. Tight spaces, designed so someone could lie flat on their back and listen to everything happening above them." I couldn't stop picturing it then. Someone underneath you while you sleep. Someone hearing you breathe, hearing you talk in your dreams, hearing you cry, hearing you laugh, learning your routine. Someone waiting until the afternoon, until exactly 1 p.m. to start moving. "Did you catch them?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way he sounded. "No," he said. "Whatever was down there wasn't there when we arrived. We don't know if it was a person, or more than one. We don't know how long it's been going on." 10 years have passed since that night. The tunnels were filled with concrete. They sealed them off as best as they could. The story never became a national headline. There were brief local articles, rumors, people whispering about how the police found something bad under the neighborhood. Then it faded, like most things do. They never caught the person or the thing that had been living down there. I tried to forget. I tried to turn myself into someone normal again. I moved on. I finished school. I got a job. I ended up in a high-rise apartment in Boston where the walls are thick and the neighbors are strangers, and the building feels too modern for secrets. For a long time, it worked. Life covered the memory with layers, like dust settling on a shelf. Then about a week ago, the humidity in my bedroom started rising for no reason. The air felt heavy, sticky, like summer until dark spots appeared on the plaster ceiling, spreading in soft circles like damp rot. I called maintenance. They said it was probably a minor leak and they'd check it soon. Yesterday, at exactly 1:00 p.m., I was sitting in my living room reading. The apartment was quiet in that midday way it gets when everyone is at work and the city noise is strangely muted. And I heard a faint, steady dragging sound coming from inside the bedroom wall. Slow, heavy, familiar, my hands went cold around my book. Then, from right behind the power outlet next to my bed, a whisper came through. Not loud, not dramatic, just close, wet, and breathing against the words like whoever spoke had their mouth right up to the other side of the plastic. We missed you.